Welcome back and thanks for tuning in to Opinion. Ah, Disneyland, where dreams come true. But have you ever walked around Disneyland and just felt a twinge of dissatisfaction? Or walked around daydreaming what you would change if you were suddenly an Imagineer? Well, I have. As a longtime fan of Disney theme parks, I'm here to share with you my list of 10 rides or attractions I daydream about fixing. In this video, I'll be focusing completely on Disneyland Park itself. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you that if you like what you see, you can subscribe right there for more content, or down below.
Oh, and there is one more thing.
I've probably spent more time than the average person at Disneyland without even having an annual pass. What's the reason, you ask? I worked there for 8 years. Are you ready to go? Let's get to work.
Remain seated, please.
The People Mover! Tomorrowland seems to be having a little bit of an identity crisis. We'll get more into that later. One thing that might keep it relevant as it moves into the future might be a nod or two to its past. And that's why I say, bring back the People Mover. The People Mover is a classic ride and has at least 2 huge benefits. One is that as it weaves its way along its elevated path, you get a really terrific cross-sectional view of all of Tomorrowland. The other is that it's a ride you can actually take a break and relax on, or make out in when you go into a show building. Gorge! The west side of the park already has this in the form of the Mark Twain Riverboat and Columbia. And the entire park itself has this in the Disneyland Railroad. And for younger first-time visitors, the People Mover is a great way to get acquainted with Tomorrowland, which can be a little overwhelming. The Indiana Jones Adventure! I actually still worked at the park when this attraction opened. Right around the time Paul Pressler started ruining everything. Oh boy! I feel like this attraction emerged at a time when ride technology was in a state of transition. So it ended up being a resting place for show ideas and effects that just couldn't stand the test of time. What would I fix? Here's my short list. Did you know that this ride had a falling rubble effect made with frozen tea water? The machine that produced the ice for this effect just wasn't maintained, so it was deactivated and sat on top of the show building for years, rusting away. Find a way to put that effect back in. Do it with projections. Speaking of projections, the cheesy Mara spirit when your vehicle travels through the giant Mara head. Oh my god, fix that already. I found this simple projection video on YouTube, and it's 10 times better than what they've got. Animate that crap! The rat projection room, the bug room with the really stupid blasted air effects. Come on guys, this is carnival level stuff. Let's get this ride back to its previous state of fortune and glory. Critter Country! I'm dealing with my own Critter Country at the moment. 2 of them. Critter Country has been a dead end for years. Yeah, I know, Splash Mountain is over there, which in and of itself is a great reward just for making the trek, especially if you're dealing with a raging case of swamp bud. How about we make an alternate route around the north side of Rivers of America that will allow guests to stroll over to Fantasyland instead of having to walk down, around, and back up the river? I propose you call it Riverwalk. It could weave along the northeast shore of the river, meander under the train tracks, and then maybe even pass through some interesting caverns as it winds closer to Big Thunder Mountain. You could tie in a bit of Thunder Mountain lore while giving the guests something interesting to look at. You could even make the enclosed section of the walk tie into Galaxy's Edge. The next 2 kind of work in conjunction, so stay with me as I explain both of them. Toontown! Toontown is a mess, folks. Fix it or ditch it. The colors have faded, the gags aren't kept up, no more Goofy's bounce house, nobody knows who Gadget is, and Chippendale's treehouse looks like something out of an episode of Hoarders. Even the Jolly Trolley has been grounded, and overall, it's just not a space that has a natural flow for guests. And in the summer with crowds and heat, it's anything but fun. So hit the reset button already. Which leads me to my next big change. Get rid of Toontown and turn it into a villain land. The Disney villains are incredibly popular in all of the theme parks, but they have no permanent presence in any of them whatsoever. So turn Toontown into a dark, foreboding land where the villains will have a permanent home. And the possibilities within the land are endless. You could have grottos, castles, caves. You could definitely fit a few small attractions in there. Jafar's Genie Chase Coaster, Maleficent's Magic Shop, and you could have photo locations and meet and greets for some of the bigger villains. Don't worry, I didn't completely ditch Toontown. Here's what I want to do with it. I would love to see Toontown moved over to the area that Autopia currently occupies. Alright, get this out of here, put it over here, put in Villains Land, combine Toontown with the idea of the bustling roadways of Autopia, And you have my new land proposal, Toontopia! Yes, an expanded, bigger, more bustling version of Toontown. Basically what you would get is a Toontown that looks more like a city, and Autopia would be integrated into the land, so it looks like there's highways and byways curving in and out of all the activity. There have been so many new feature animated films and characters added to the Disney Codex. So let's get a big city where we can see a wider range of characters. You can still have some of the classic Toontown stuff, rides, attractions, shops, and restaurants, but in a bigger scale that incorporates the last 10 to 20 years of Disney animation. I'm not going to get too far into this one, but if you made Toontopia right and made it big enough, guess what you could put in?
This could go in the new Toontown. I'm just gonna leave this right here.
Do it.
The Princess Rides.
The Snow White and Little Mermaid rides end so quickly. Let's see the Snow White ending from Paris. Get that in there. And what happened to the battle scene between Ursula and Prince Eric's ship? That scene was actually included in the original plans for the ride. Now Ursula is just kind of brushed off to the side, and I can't even tell if she's dying or singing a gospel song.
The Haunted Mansion.
So there's two things we need to talk about with the Haunted Mansion. Something that's been there for a long time that probably needs to change, and something that was there for a long time that didn't need to change. Having grown up with Disneyland and not even making it to Disney World until 1993, I was thrilled when I realized that their Haunted Mansion had extra rooms, a library and a music room. I'd like to draw your attention to the loading area of Disneyland's Haunted Mansion. To be completely honest, I've never really liked that it's just a big, cavernous, undefined space. My first big fix would be to transform the queue and loading area into the library and music room. Not only would guests have an extra show element to look at while they're waiting to board, but because of the library and music room's placement early in the ride, it still fits the theme that the ghosts haven't quite materialized yet. I think it would be really cool to be waiting to board your Doom Buggy and catching out of the corner of your eye one book on a shelf moving by itself, or just a couple ghostly notes being played on the piano. What else would I change? Well, it would actually involve reversing something that was added in 2006. Bring back the original bride. Imagineers decided that it was time to update the attic scene. Although it terrified me as a kid, the attic was probably one of my favorite parts of the mansion. The heartbeat, the ghouls popping out of hat boxes and trunks, and the terrifying bride herself standing there in eerie silence. As a kid, I could always hear the attic scene coming up while watching the ballroom scene, and I would get so spooked out that my heart would start beating with the heart in the attic. Now we have Constance Hatchaway, who talks and smirks and wields a little axe and takes all the spooky tension out of the attic. I can't stand when things tell you that they're scary, and that's exactly what's going on here. I honestly want to ask you, what's more terrifying? A bunch of jump scares and someone screaming in your face? Or that quiet guy behind you in line at the grocery store with one drop of blood on his suit? The original bride was an actual animatronic figure that really brought life to the character, so to speak. You know what I mean. Constance Hatchaway looks like one of those projections you put in your window at Halloween. One of the things I really liked about the old bride was that her personal backstory was never really set in stone. The Imagineers left it up to the writer's imagination to try to figure out who she was and what she was doing there. Now we have Constance giving you every little detail. I also think her character really screws up the previous lore of the mansion. I mean, is it all about her now? Is the miniature bride at the end now supposed to be Constance as well? Who are all these husbands? Are they in the mansion too? Did nobody ever catch on that like 5 husbands bit the dust in what seems like a very short amount of time? Constance, get a hobby. You're not good at this marriage thing. It's just too complicated. Also, a woman who beheaded 5 of her husbands is named Constance Hatchaway. How obvious is that? Good thing those guys never went out with Agnes Nussbaum or Margaret McPoison your tea.
Star Tours.
Now that Galaxy's Edge is coming to the park, it would probably make sense to consolidate everything Star Wars related into that. More specifically, it would free up the Star Tours show building for possibly a new attraction. And honestly, even with the upgrades a few years back, the technology on the ride is starting to get a bit dated. I mean, yeah, it's not going to look as good, but you can go on this type of ride in most shopping malls now. So put a whole new attraction where Star Tours was. By the way, did you know that since the release of The Last Jedi, they made every ride experience on Star Tours exactly the same? Yep, you're gonna get the same ride every time you go on it these days. And that came straight from a cast member. That's how bad they're still pushing The Last Jedi, which in case you haven't seen my other videos, I thought was a dumpster fire.
Pirates of the Caribbean. Because Pirates of the Caribbean doesn't sound right.
I was there in the 90s for the very first of the changes to Pirates of the Caribbean. First, someone was offended that the men were chasing the women. So then the women chased the men. And then the men all drank. First there was a girl in a barrel. Then there was a cat in a barrel. And now Johnny Depp is in a barrel. And now the icing on the cake, this stuff with the auction scene. So what would I change? Nothing. Can we just leave this ride alone already? We already know that pirates are not historically nice people that we'd want to have to dinner. If we keep sanitizing them and just making them safe and fun, I think eventually we'll be telling the wrong story. And there does come a point at which you're changing the original Imagineer's intentions. On a completely different note, I think this new scene that they recently added just nails it. And whether intended or not, is a really nice homage to the original designers of this brilliant ride, who didn't need fancy special effects to tell a great story.
The America Sings Interventions Star Tours Launch Bay building thing.
With technology moving so fast these days, it's going to be challenging for Tomorrowland to stay updated and relevant, unless perhaps they think about redefining what the word Tomorrowland is meant to represent. Since children are pretty much the lifeblood of what Disney represents in essence, maybe make Tomorrowland about them. You've already got an existing show building for it. Yep, I'm talking about the America Sings building, which has housed everything from the attraction I just mentioned to Interventions and the Star Wars Launch Bay. It's important to explore the past so we can see where we're going. Here's my idea. Make the bottom floor a Walt Disney Museum, kind of like a satellite version of the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco. There, guests of all ages could learn about Walt Disney's past and his accomplishments. Make the top floor a Young Imagineers and Animation Workshop, where young guests can come and explore design and art. You could have guest Imagineers and actual Disney artists visit to talk about their careers. Young guests could start at the ground level to learn about the past and then move up to explore the possibilities of their future. And another element I would add is that it would be very important not to flood this guest experience with branding and merchandise. And let kids know that you're really interested in inspiring them rather than just seeing them as consumers. So that's my list. What would you love to fix at Disneyland? Be sure to comment down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.